can all leave and they don't mark us absent. Come on.
Ha.
That, by the way, was not the rule in law school. You better keep your butt in that chair the entire time.
Are we live?
Are we?
I think we might be live. Let's see what people say. Yeah, in law school, you don't get to dip during class if the teacher doesn't show up. What did you guys say?
You just sit there and read.
You cannot get out of your work. I'm gonna ask the chat. Can you all hear us? Oh, I was in caps lock. Can you all hear us? Ooh, scary emojis. I think we might be live. Oh, hey, you can hear me. Mute. Yeah, in law school, you don't get to dip during class if the teacher doesn't. I can hear myself. Out of your technology. I'm gonna ask the chat. Technology, mute. Get out of your. How am I hearing myself? I'm gonna ask the chat. Can you all hear us? Oh, yes. Okay, I figured it out. Wow. Yeah, the exciting double audio streaming.
Yes, that's not jarring at all to hear yourself come back to yourself like 20 seconds later.
No, I'm sure the chat didn't find it strange at all. I guess we're here. We're here. Everyone says that we're audible. We're live. We have a good connection.
Yes.
So awesome. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us today on a Sunday. I know it's late for some of you, especially those of you farther east of of Nevada, where I live. And I just wanted to say thanks. And we have a guest on our channel, someone way more intelligent and exciting than me, who knows lots of things that we all wish we knew. This is Greg, the lawyer.
Hello, everybody. I am more knowledgeable than you in some areas. I would hazard to guess I am not more intelligent than you are. And also on the excitement thing, I think you might have got that backwards as well. But that's fine. I'm happy to be here.
I feel like I somehow wrangled Greg into doing this. He was very open to the idea of doing a legal chat, which I don't know, Greg, if this is super precedented, which I'm not trying to say we're special. I'm just saying I think people usually will have like a lawyer on to talk about something after a bad thing happens, but no bad thing has happened. We're here to talk about fun and exciting things, which is publishing for Shadowdark RPG.
Right. Yeah. This will not be like certain RPG adjacent woodworkers having their lawyers on the air. This is a much nicer setup. And I don't know if it's unprecedented either. I do know that when I spoke to another attorney about it, they were like, wait, so your client wants you to go on the air and just talk to the world about their license? I'm like, yeah. They're like, okay, well, be careful.
Right. And I guess this
so here I am being careful.
Greg is not anyone's except my lawyer. So don't, he's not like giving you legal counsel. He's giving us.
Yes, I will get that out of the way at the top that while I am a lawyer, I am not your lawyer, although I am your lawyer, Kelsey. I'm not the lawyer of anybody anybody else who's on the chat, unless in the rare circumstance they happen to be an Arcane library employee. But at any rate, legal advice is something that happens when an individual person comes to an attorney with their particular fact situation and asks for an opinion. That's not going to be the case here. So none of this is to be considered legal advice. This is just Kelsey and I chatting about the license, and we'll answer questions, but it's not legal advice from me to you. Disclaimer over.
Good. It's always smart to do the disclaimer. I think everybody
scare everybody away right off the top.
I know everyone's already scared. We're scaring people. Well, so I guess why don't we jump right in with our questions, because I know that some folks had been submitting questions for us through the Discord server and other avenues, and so we want to talk about those. We only have a handful of them, really. And I think how they kind of connect back to the broad idea of how this license works. And we have the Shadowdark RPG third-party creator license, I think we call it. But there should be a link in the chat to download it, and we're probably going to reference it during this. So if you want to download it to have it to look at, it's just one page. Greg and team wrote it in the beautiful Shadowdark style of being impactful, succinct, and on one page. So which was a miracle. So that is a feat unto itself. But I'm going to ask Greg the questions and kind of throw these things at him, and we'll talk about them as we go down the line. So are you ready, Greg? Are you ready to jump in?
I am.
Okay. All right, chat. Buckle up. Here we go. So one of the first questions that we got from folks was, if you want to share fan creations and homebrew material for free rather than charging or asking donations, do you still need to include the little tiny boilerplate license statement in your product?
The answer to that is yes. I think the first sentence of the license, where it said you're welcome to charge money, basically is meant to be inclusive and not to exclude people from commercial efforts. It's not to say, and it also isn't meant to exclude non-commercial or giving away stuff for free. So if you're going to, what the license does is grant you the ability to use certain things from Shadowdark the RPG without without having to pay a royalty or anything like that. And you need to do that whether you pay or not. So and basically you do that by putting in the attribution statement. And I guess this is a good segue just briefly into copyright generally. I won't go crazy about it, but copyrights are granted to people who create an expression of an idea in a fixed medium. But in this case, it applies to the expression of an idea of a role of the all of the elements of the role-playing game, basically setting aside for a moment the issues of game mechanics and copyrightability, but sort of the expression of all of that in the book. As soon as Kelsey wrote that and set it down, that became, she had copyright in that, which means she has the ability to control who can duplicate it, do derivative works, sell it, distribute it, make copies of it, all that kind of stuff. And what this license does is sort of lend out a little bit of piece of those rights to people who are willing to comply by the terms of the license. So I know I sound a little lawyerly, but it'll get better or worse. We'll see.
You are a lawyer, so
that is true. Yes,
that makes sense to me. And believe me, if Greg could bring me to understanding these concepts, then I feel anyone listening could understand them. So hopefully that's the case. Okay, so that's a good question. So any work that's derived from Shadowdark needs to have that little piece of information in it, whether it's free or not, essentially, is the conclusion there. So
yes, yeah, and it generally referred to that as the attribution statement.
Cool. The attribution statement. Awesome. All right. Our next question. Someone is asking if the Cursed Scroll zine content falls under the scope of this license. I can probably answer that one myself, and
Go for it.
help me if I don't answer right. But so technically, no. The license is specific to the contents of the Shadowdark RPG book that it's printed in. And Cursed Scroll zines are kind of like my third-party content for the game. So they don't fall under the terms of this license. But anybody you see using material from it specifically has asked me for permission, and I've given them a specific license to do that. There are some people out there with that permission. So I'm not saying I wouldn't do that, but no, anything from Cursed Scroll zines is like my third-party work, just like you guys can make third-party work for the game. You could make your own kind of zine just like that, and it's yours.
Exactly. This might be a good sort of another way to just explain the license sort of in broad sense based off of this question. I know that, in recent months, there may have been some high profile cases of licensing in the RPG community causing mass confusion and also a lot of other emotions and issues out in the world. And a license, and in particular, this license grants a license stands on its own. It's just wording that licenses you to do something. In the case of copyright, it licenses you, the licensee, to do something with the licensed content. It has to be applied to content. So just as an analogy, and not to get anybody's dander up, the original OGL was used to license the SRD. In this case, the Shadowdark third-party license is used to license the Shadowdark RPG. It is not used to license the Cursed Scrolls or any future, Arcane Library monster book or Arcane Library, lore or campaign setting or anything like that may or may not be coming out. I'm going to start a bunch of rumors.
Yes. What will the next thing be? Right. So that makes sense. It's specific to the book and the content allowed from the core book.
It's specific to the core rulebook. That is what is released under the Shadowdark license.
Yeah. And that's not to say that people like we were saying, it's not like I don't want people to not use Cursed Scroll stuff. If you want to use something from Cursed Scroll, just talk to me about it. And
get permission, basically.
like if you see some things appearing on like character generators online that look like they're from Curse Scroll, it's because those people have gotten permission from me to do it, and that kind of stuff makes me happy. So I'm always open to those kinds of conversations. All right, our next question. All right, so we got a rather long question with some specific cases, but it kind of boils down to the question of, is publishing content that references or alters tables from Shadowdark RPG okay? And maybe an example here would be, somebody wants to create a table that looks like the trap generator table that I have in the book. And so they're using the general layout of that, but they're making their own content within that's generated. Is that okay to do? And in my opinion, that's okay to do. Greg, do you agree that like you can use
and I would say I
yeah.
feel like there might be 2 or 3 prongs to that question.
Mm-hmm.
Referencing is definitely not a problem. So if somebody makes, and I'll just talk about this and maybe other questions in terms of some hypothetical module that somebody makes, right? Somebody makes a module that's Shadowdark compatible. If they were to go and reference a particular table on a particular page, no problem. If they wanted to have a table for similar types of events or similar types of activities, but they wanted to completely change it or change it enough, the gray area is always what is enough. But if you add things or remove things or change it around or reword some stuff, so that it's a different thing basically, but it looks like that table, or maybe it's a supplemental table for overland travel or whatever it might be. Yeah, then you put that in. That's also not a problem. That may not even be something that you would need a license for if you've created your own table. And then sort of a third area is like, can I just reprint tables from the core book? And that answer would be no, unless it is something that is allowed under the license, which is, I believe, items, monsters, and spells.
Yeah, and I think
are reprintable sort of, by themselves, or like sort of wholesale or whatever. You just take a spell and reprint the spell contents in your module if you want. But if you wanted to grab the fighter class description and tables and everything else and just throw that in the module, just to maybe you want to be helpful, right, to the players, but that's not something that's allowed under the license. And a sort of a one way to think about it would really be like, if what I'm doing, would somebody who had this like not need the core rules, then you might be straying on the not allowed side of the third party license line versus the allowed side of it. And that's not to sound like, evil and corporate. That's to say there's a reason the game was produced and offered for sale. And, we want to reward creators for making good creations. And just like we hope that, our third party publishers are going to take the inspiration from Shadowdark, make compatible things, sell it, and, make tons of money. Or maybe not even ton, but they'll just have a good time doing it.
As much as you can. Like that's one of the things. And when Greg was working on this license and his team, one of the things that I asked of the team was, I want people to be able to make a genuine, maybe career out of publishing for Shadowdark. Like I want people to be able to do as much as they possibly can and keep and publish their material for profit. So, that's
just like what some people don't seem to remember about you when they were criticizing things was that you made a career for a while out of publishing 5e adjacent stuff, and it's possible, it's doable, people do it, and it's within the terms of an open license. So, but now, you got your own game, and it's rich for creation for sure. The one I already bought a campaign setting, the Shadow Sun setting, which I thought was fantastic.
So cool.
Yeah, it's funny that seems like such a typical gamer move. I have the PDFs, but like I don't even have the hard copy of the game, and I'm already trying to buy a bunch of supplements or download a bunch of stuff because I have to be a completionist and get everything that comes out.
Oh my gosh, I'm kind of a completionist too. I totally get it. Oh man. Wow, you guys, I just checked our questions. We have a lot of questions.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll just, while you're teeing up the next one from the list, and maybe I'll try to keep things a little short on my end. I'm not looking at the chat. Kelsey can see it, but I can't. So just if I seem not to be following once in a while, that's why. And I don't want to distract myself by having the YouTube going in front of me and seeing the chat. It would just be discombobulating.
So much information. Well, we're definitely trying to like get through questions that folks asked ahead of time because people
Yeah,
were
yeah.
so kind as
Throw
to
me the next one on the list. Let's
the
cruise.
next one. Okay, I'm jumping to our next one. How permissible is licensing to make a character management or generation tool? I'd like to make a tool for private use to ease the transition for my players from existing platforms. That's kind of a true two-pronged question.
Yeah, I mean, the answer to the first one is that if you've seen, people are making online tools are doing that with individual permission. So they should probably, you get, right, Kelsey, contact Arcane Library if you want to do online tools, because generally those are the result of taking the core rules, maybe not necessarily in their entirety, but whole chunks of them and using them with the tool to put stuff out. And so that gets a little bit beyond the scope of the license. The second half of that, or maybe it's not a half, but where somebody said something for private use. I guess I want to be clear under the terms of copyright, and this isn't to come down on anybody, but is that private use means you make something and you use it. But if you make for instance, you're allowed to copy a book. Sometimes it'll say for your own personal use. That means a copy for yourself. It doesn't mean 5 copies for your friends. And if you're to make an online tool and all of your gaming group uses it, that's something that that's something that's not really private anymore. The rules or the law when it comes to copyrights and presentation or distribution. From a practical standpoint, there may be things that we call de minimis, which means they're too small to worry about. But from a legal technical standpoint, once you start sharing stuff, you're distributing. So that's not to necessarily to, wag my finger at you. I'm just letting, if stuff comes up that it seems like it's a good way to segue to a point about copyrights or whatever, I'm going to do it because that's just sort of how lawyers roll.
We gotta there's lessons baked in, so no, and it's true, but at the same time too, it's we're I'm a person and I am excited that people are excited about the game. And if I feel like something you're doing is reasonable, am I going to be mad about it? Because the other thing too, Greg, that's maybe worth mentioning for us is that, how we decide to enforce this is not just a robot saying you broke the rules, you're getting sued. It's not like a robotic process where you're automatically getting in trouble. It's we take things on a case-by-case basis. And I think that a reasonable human being is behind a lot of the decision-making about this license. And so that's something worth noting. Yeah.
I don't, I have to be careful not to have, client consultation live in front of the entire world. But yes, I would agree. You're an eminently reasonable client. And, and generally you're a good egg, and everybody I think who's been on the Discord and all that, and anybody who's interacted with you on the community understands where you're coming from with this stuff. And we don't have lawsuit GPT cranked up, just crawling the web looking for people to talk to.
Oh my God, scary. I hope we never do that.
And I think we can both certify that no Pinkertons are employed by the Arcane Library. So
nope. Wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. Oh man. Okay. So our next question, and once we get through these questions, then I'll scroll back through our live chat. I made the mistake of looking at the live chat and being like, well, it's a lot, but we'll come back to those. The next question is, do we sanction the use of replicated or closely similar product layout? For Shadowdark specifically, I want to exclude anything about 5e because my 5e material is a different story. But for Shadowdark, I mean, making it look like a black and white clean layout with tables and headers is not really, in my opinion, a problem. It's the problem would be if someone was making something and intentionally trying to make it look like one of my works, as much as they could, or taking images, header images from my tables.
Right. Yeah, if copying artwork would be verboten, but making it look Shadowdarky, it does wind up being sometimes a bit of a gray area. The thing you would, I think, to make sure that you're doing things that would be sort of above board and in the spirit and the letter of the license would be, don't copy any artwork to do your layout. So directly from the Shadowdark RPG or the Curse Scrolls or any of the publications. But to the extent you're talking about, a black header strip with white letters, That's, we don't have the we don't have that.
Yeah, that's not
We're
like,
doing something other people do.
Yeah.
But I would say and then just to make double sure that everything's, A-okay, is make sure you include the attribution language, and that when you put the logo at the front, the back, wherever, the compatible with, Shadowdark, one of the approved logos that you're allowed to use from the license or the creator pack. That way, nobody thinks that you're trying to pretend you're from the Arcane library. That's more of a trademark than a copyright issue. But that's when you start to talk about how close your product looks to somebody else. And a case from way back when, those of you who remember the old AD&D books, they had the little yellow stripe with the red letters. Or maybe it was white letters, but it was a little yellow stripe in the corner. And, oh, you know what? There. No, there. No, there.
I know, it's like mirror imaged.
Yeah, it's weird. Anyway, that little stripe. Sorry. I'm pointing all over the place. At any rate, there was some issue when people started doing that, because then that makes it look like, oh, it's from, at the time, TSR. So if you just, the key is don't try to represent that you're an Arcane library product. And thus far, nobody is suggesting that they want to do that. And that's not what the spirit of this question was. But if everybody who's producing stuff wants to keep sort of on the straight and narrow, yeah, if it's in black and white, if it's got gritty artwork, if it's got short, pithy sentences, which is awesome, all of that stuff, is great. It's just don't, any of the artwork which individual artists created and licensed to Kelsey to use in the book and all that, can't take that stuff. But if you get your own or whatever, then it happens to look super cool and old school, so much the better.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to see adventures that try to use a succinct and hopefully effective style. I don't know if what I write is effective. I hope it is. I hope that it's something that you guys think would be fun to write a similar type thing for. All right. Next question. Can the product, we kind of did answer this. Can tables or things follow a similar or identical format for ease of reference? As in, like, could I set up a table to have a similar set, like say like table title, and then like using a similar setup to the table, but having original content in it?
Yeah, and that would be fine.
Yeah.
Identical, no. Similar, as long as it's not, that's a copyright gray area, of course, right? Because it's how distinct is it? How different is it? And that's always, that can always be an open question. But just, again, as we mentioned before, just outright, cut and paste of a table or a paragraph or anything like that isn't good. But referencing the table, or if the table, for instance, the carousing or things like that, if you're going to say, oh, I've got my own idea for a set of that, or you make your own character class, which people have done, you're going to have a talent table. Well, you can call it a talent table. It can look just like a talent table, but all of the individual talents that you would roll for, those have to be different.
Yeah. And that brings up a good question too, which is kind of baked into some of these, Greg, which is some of the things, like, let's say in the fighter talent table, there's certain things that are relatively generic in the way that they're stated, and probably using game rules couldn't be stated any differently.
Right.
So what would that mean for somebody, like if they want to make like +2 to strength, dexterity, or constitution? Would it be okay to say something like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you're not ever going to be how are you going to say it any different than that? You might, and then you start getting into all sorts of stuff. And no matter how, you reverse the order, you do this, you say, they're going to be, it's the same thing that you're doing. And there are certain things that are so basic that the different ways you could express them, they're so different. The differences are minor. So, and something like that, clearly. Yeah. And this gets back to Kelsey's statement about her reasonableness earlier, right? I don't think you're I don't know if you are, we'll have to talk offline, but I don't think you're the type of client that's going to want to take somebody to task because they said add +1 to your strength.
No, I honestly think, I think that what our license does is it tries to protect the creative value of the work, and something that doesn't meet a minimum amount of creativity, like if it can only be expressed in a certain game term way, then it's more a game term. It's not really I wouldn't call it like the creative side of the work necessarily. Greg might be, in slight disagreement. I don't know, but something like add +2 to your strength score, there's just no other way to say that. And so that's not ripping off the text verbatim. That's just writing a game rule in the way that it needs to be written.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of stuff is not what you're worried about, what we're worried about.
Yes.
It's more, if there were to be a unique type of talent or something that you came up that Shadowdark has in the table. Not that if there were, there are, and copying those things wouldn't be good, but yeah, the basic stuff like that. And I think that's just sort of common sense.
Yeah, hopefully.
Although I will say, just even this semi-brief discussion of that illustrates the work, the heavy lifting that that other folks are trying to do when they craft a license that just has a definition that fits all of those eventualities baked in. That's why we tried to keep it simple and keep it down to a page and just say you can't copy. And I know some people, some of it seems harsh when you say you can't copy anything except these things, but that's if you look at the license in Morkborg, it's similar. If you look at, and I know I'm not pronouncing it right, but I'm not Swedish.
I don't know how to say it.
Yeah. I'll just, anyway, you keep it simple, because if you're going to try to define or come up with every eventuality, it's in a license, the book would be all license and no game.
Right. And if we tried to do that with game design, the game would be all game and no fun. So like, exactly, it's I feel like it's impossible to define every corner case. And so we try to create broad guidelines that when mixed with common sense will make, will lead you in the right direction.
We wanted a rules light license.
That's right.
Everybody wants us to put dual wielding in it. I don't even know what's going on with that.
They're like, where's the dual wielding clause? Oh man. All right. So we've got someone asking, can they make free printable monster spell card items or for sale versions of the Cursed Scroll zine stuff? We kind of touched on this earlier, but this license only, the license only pertains to the stuff from Shadowdark RPG, the core rules. So technically no, but if you want to do something like that, please just reach out to me and we'll talk about it. It's not like I would never, ever let someone use something, but we would have to make a specific license between us to that. So,
but the first part of that, if they wanted to do, spell cards or item cards or whatever for the stuff in the core rule book, yeah, that's fine under the license. That is sort of the one of the things that we were envisioning with the license. And I think with third-party licenses, you have gradations of stuff, and that's sort of a beginner grade, right? Is like you just reproducing things from the core book, but maybe in a way that are more usable quickly during gameplay or something. And then there's like, other levels, which is like we're creating content, like new content that's meant to sort of connect in and mesh with the content and of the game or the game system itself. So like I mentioned Shadow Sun, but there could be others. People create a setting or people create a module that uses the rules to, create a world for somebody to game in or something. So, and actually that's the kind of stuff I'm really hoping to see more of that.
I want to see, I don't want to be the only one writing adventures and worlds. We've got Lord Tath writing Soul Blight. We've got, is it Greg? Greg had other Greg had written
Other
Shadow
Greg,
Sun.
yes, not me.
And there's such cool stuff out there, like third-party stuff that I'm so glad exists because of this license. I couldn't have written them. Like
there's a whole world of adventuring ducks, I guess, that I never even knew existed. So.
Oh yeah, Darcy Perry, the legend, writing us some amazing material. He has an upcoming one based on owls. It's like owl ancestries and classes, and I've gotten to see it, and it's so cool. And he's done art for it. It's just so cool to be able to support projects like that.
Darcy's funny on the Discord. I think he said something about, well, I'm from New Zealand, so I wouldn't know what U.S. copyright law was, and he speculated about it. I'm like, no, you pretty much nailed it. It's
there you go. So Darcy is a man of common sense.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So, all right. So someone was saying, am I allowed to copy verbatim passages besides spell and monster stat blocks? I mean, technically, no. We did just talk about how verbatim passage doesn't mean you can't make game rules. It just means like actual chunks of text from the book. But you can copy everything from every monster in the book and every spell. And we just updated the license to version 1.1 to clarify that you can also do this for the magic items listed in the book. So that's like half the book that you guys can pull out and use. Even the descriptive elements of the monsters and magic items, you can use all of that. So those are the things that you can indeed copy verbatim, which leads to the next question. Someone is saying, I preface this by saying I don't want to do this, but is a license allowing someone to copy monster stats and create a monster manual consisting mainly of Kelsey's work and then charge money for it? I mean, technically, yes, but I mean, you can't use the art from the monster chapter or the art from the headers. And I mean, I don't know if people would like appreciate that. I don't know if that would necessarily generate you a bunch of goodwill if you did something like that, but under the terms of the license, could you? I mean, yes, you could.
Yeah, I mean, you could make a Shadowdark bestiary with, you take every word of the monster text, just the descriptions of the names and descriptions and stats of the individual monsters, all of that, cut and paste the verbiage, and then put in all your own art with pictures and all that, or no art. I mean, you could do that. You just can't, yeah, as Kelsey said, just can't use the art from the core rulebook. Would something like that sell? I don't know. Those are business decisions. But under the terms of the license, that particular question, yes, you could do that.
Yeah, and it's because ultimately I want folks to be able to include monster stats in their products or riff on monsters or take a monster and make new ones. And so the only way to do that would be letting you use them in such a way. So I guess, I don't know if this is kind of also an expression of goodwill from me. I hope that you guys see that I want you guys to be able to use the building blocks of this game. And so, could someone take that to an extreme? Yes, of course. But I don't really imagine anyone would actually do that and think it was like a cool thing to do, I guess. Okay, someone's saying, I'm interested in creating a free module for a virtual tabletop. I believe that I am able to use all the content from the Quickstart, including Lost Citadel of the Scarlet Minotaur. No, sorry. No. Anyone who has used information from the Quickstart guides in a virtual tabletop has done so with explicit permission, and that includes the adventure. So please don't take that content and republish it without permission. That would be outside the terms of the license.
Yep. And I will say that VTT, there's quite a few of them, and there seems to be renewed interest for some reason in VTTs. And that's a whole other kettle of fish when you're talking about licensing. The third-party license is not broad enough just to allow somebody to take the core rules and put it on Owlbear Rodeo, for example. That's something that would have to be done under permission. And to the extent that you all have seen Shadowdark elements in the VTTs, those have been, well, one, they've been either done with permission, or two, we don't know about it. But
major ones I know of, like Foundry and Fantasy Grounds and stuff, those have been done with permission. So and very kind people were so thoughtful in seeking out my permission and my blessing on doing those things, which makes me happy. I think it means we have a really like good-willed community. So that's okay.
Yeah, certainly we'd love to see people playing Shadowdark on VTT. Yeah. So there's talk and whatnot in the works. Well, that's your thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, we're talking to.
I'm just excited about it too, because I have gamer friends like everybody else from all over the country or the world maybe, and it's like you guys have to play Shadowdark. And
that's how we can do it. That's how I can play D&D or Shadowdark with my friends across the country. So yeah, so I think even in our live stream chat, which I've been glancing at, like Gwydion, I know his team's working on some Fantasy Ground stuff, and that's all stuff based on discussions we've had off screen. So, okay, so we're nearing the end of our questions, then we can jump into the open part of this. Someone's asking, is if I create something using the Shadowdark license, can I also share it under Creative Commons? Is there a way to do that while excluding the content that's using the Shadowdark license? Greg, you have a good way.
Yeah, yes and yes. I'll just sort of explain how that works really quickly. And I will say that I don't want to get it wrong, but I might. Is it Elven Tower?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he makes it. I don't know if it's a zine that he makes,
Yeah, like a magazine
Yeah, like a zine where he does, and that was actually a huge very early on in the process. I don't even know if the Kickstarter had closed yet
no.
before he announced that he produces regular installments of maps and settings and adventures basically. And he was like, I'm converting to Shadowdark, which was awesome. And he releases stuff on some of his stuff under Creative Commons too. So it's a good example of how that can work, which is basically so without getting too deep into stuff, if you're going to do that, you would have some material from Shadowdark that you're using under license through the third-party license, and then you would create you're creating. That's the whole point of this third-party product, right? Or a secondary creation is that you have some Shadowdark stuff, and then you layer on all of your stuff. This is used with permission. This you own. You have the copyright in it because you created it. If you want to release this piece of it under Creative Commons, go ahead. You just have to make sure in your attribution statement for Creative Commons that you indicate that this is licensed. I hope I keep waving the right hands. That this is licensed, excuse me, separately and is not being released under Creative Commons. And actually, some people think Creative Commons is like a magic wand. Like if you just publish under it, you've released stuff to the world. That's true if you have the rights to do it, right? So I wasn't casting shade on Wizards. When they release the SRD, it is out in the wild and it ain't coming back in terms of Creative Commons. But if I took the DCC core rulebook and made my own printing of it and said I'm releasing it under Creative Commons, one, I'd probably get sued, and two, it wouldn't work because I can't take somebody else's licensed material without their permission and release it under any other license, whether it's Creative Commons or not. So to go back, so I have this tendency, people will ask me what time it is, and I start explaining, how to create a watch. But to wrap it back up, if you want to create your own original work that features some Shadowdark elements that are under the third-party license, as long as you follow our license, you are more than welcome to release your product under whatever other license you feel like releasing it under. It just does not release the Shadowdark elements under that second license because you'd have to exclude them, and because the third-party license doesn't grant you permission to relicense it under some other license. That is one of the rights reserved under the license.
Cool. So technically it wouldn't work, but maybe I think one thing that Elven Tower did, which was really gracious, was to explicitly state that so that there wasn't confusion.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, technically it wouldn't work, but the Creative Commons license says you have to explicitly state it. So it was the extremely cool thing was when they contacted us to talk about it. So
yeah, that was really gracious.
So and I guess that's the thing. If you're looking to do something that's sort of a one-off, or if you want to put something big together, or you want to, you've got this project in mind, you should just don't contact me, but contact the Arcane Library. Every time, by the way, I gesture like this, I'm looking at a big screen with Kelsey's face on it. So
I'm doing that for you too. I don't know which way to point.
Yeah, I don't know which way I am, but at any rate, yes. Yeah, you're looking at chat. So
looking at everything.
So any more of the pre-submitted questions?
The last one, which was kind of, and I'm curious about Greg's opinion on this. Someone said, can I use, and feel free to not answer if you don't know, but someone is asking, so from Curse Scroll zines, there are some game mechanics like new weapons that have weapon properties. Greg is a gamer, and that is, so thank goodness he knows exactly what I mean right away when I say this. So people are asking if they could use things like the lash property from a whip weapon or the sundering property from a breakable weapon in their own material. And I can give my guess on this. I think that the way that those are worded, they're kind of a blend of creativity and game mechanics. So I think technically speaking, I don't know if I would say that's okay to use just because they're too, I don't know. Greg, what do you think on this? Could someone use that?
What I think is just in general is that copyright protects the expression of an idea, but not the idea. I'm sure by now this will be fun for you if you haven't done this, but after we're done with the live stream, people should go out and look for somebody telling the story of Harry Potter and Luke Skywalker at the same time. But they'll tell you the Harry Potter story and explain that it's really Star Wars and vice versa, because the idea of, an orphan losing his parents or parental units and going off and becoming a wizard and saving the galaxy and all that idea you can't copyright. But the expression of it, you can. So in this case, game mechanics, right? Or a sword that sunders or a whip that lashes. The idea of that you can't protect, but the expression you can. So I guess what I would say is, if you want to reference something explicitly or use the exact language, that would be tough to do under the third-party license. But if you wanted to have a weapon that could do something similar and you just expressed it differently, that would probably be all right. Because that also comes into play where, can you explain how differently can you explain the concept or the idea? So, and I guess if you want to, part of the spirit of this is we want people to create their own things. Like if you want to play a game and have a sword that sunders or a whip that lashes, I mean, whips lash, right? But your particular lash mechanic, then play the game using those components and have fun. But we're trying to encourage people to create third-party content that adds to it, that doesn't just sort of rearrange what's already there. Although sometimes that's great too. But so create new weapons that are more fabulous than any of the weapons that are already there. But to give a good answer, if I can, to to the question, I would say it would probably be all right to sort of reference by name, but once you start using the description and all that, it gets tough and recreate, and definitely not using the verbatim language. So
yeah, and if that's something super important to somebody, in something,
that's the end of it. I guess if you really want to use, this would be a general good rule of thumb, is if you want to use something from the Cursed Scroll zines, or if you really want to use something that's in in the rules, but you're not sure that it's covered by the license, you can just ask. Kelsey's very responsive. And well, you are, the Discord, you're great on there, and the Arcane library is is a great a great company.
Thank you. Company of one lady. Well, and it's what Greg is saying is true, is that like I would rather that you asked. If you're not sure, or if there's something really compelling you want to use, I've done it before and I'll do it again. I do give people special permission to do stuff if I feel like that is the right thing to do in the situation. I can't promise that to everybody because that would be silly. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'd rather that you asked, because then people can figure it out amongst themselves more easily. It's better to not do things in secret, or to feel afraid to ask. One thing about this license, and the reason we're doing this AMA, is because I have always felt like licensing was scary in the past. Like me being a writer for 5th edition, trying to decipher the OGL, there being no information about how to use it online. I don't want that for Shadowdark. I want people to be able to find out and ask questions. So just
and when in doubt, I guess is ask, and that's because the default position. And I know when you're talking about multi-billion-dollar corporations, the conversation sounds different. But but we're not talking about that here. We're talking about the person who is the company, is the author and the creator of the work. And the default situation for copyright is that the creator of the work owns the work, and for anybody else to use it requires some sort of permission. Now, what the exception to that rule, there's a lot of exceptions to the rule, but some of them might be like, well, is it protectable by copyright in the first place? Like, again, the idea isn't, a particular game mechanic isn't, but it is important to remember that those game mechanic exceptions came into the law around the time of like monopoly boards. They weren't talking about RPG rules, which are, you're not talking about the concept of picking up a little metal car and moving it 3 squares when you roll 2 6-sided dice. You're talking about other stuff, and the expression sometimes of a game mechanic and the game mechanic itself could be difficult to separate. So it's not to be scary about it. I'm just saying, ask, and Kelsey's a nice person to talk to, so I wouldn't worry about asking.
Even if I go crazy, the license protects you just as much as me in a lot of cases.
Exactly. So. Yeah. And I guess, was that the last one on the list?
That was, yeah.
So we'll just answer one that everybody asks about, and then we'll go to the chat questions, which is revocability. Mm-hmm. Because obviously, again, there was the OGL. Everybody likes to sort of obtusely reference, and it was Wizards in the OGL scandal, right? That had everybody worried about about revocability and all that other stuff. So I'll just say briefly and kind of characterize what the third-party license is. And when I'm talking about the third-party license, talking about the Arcane Libraries license for Shadowdark, that is an offer to people to be able to create work that uses aspects of the Shadowdark RPG. The way you accept that offer is to abide by the terms of the license, which are in the license itself, and publish the work. That creates an individual license between the Arcane Library and that third-party creator. So you have, whenever anybody creates something, there's like a little license agreement floating around in the world based on the fact that they accepted the terms of that offer and created that work. Could those individual license agreements be terminated at some point? It's not meant to be terminated. It just basically is under the terms of the thing. As long as the copyright's still valid, the license holds, and as long as there's no breach of the license terms, then everything's fine. As far as and I know this is a bigger question with whether it's irrevocable, the idea of would the offer ever be revoked, right? Because people talk with the OGL, oh, they can't deauthorize it. Whether they could or could not, we're not getting into that. But that raises the question here. Well, the PDFs are out there in the world of the Shadowdark RPG, and they include this offer, this license. So that is still available. That's going to be available to people as long as those PDFs are available. The printed copies, when they get out, are going to have that license in it. So that license offer will be valid that entire time. It really would be nigh impossible. You never say impossible when you're talking about law stuff, but it would be nearly impossible. It would be a very, very difficult hurdle to revoke that offer en masse and just say, no, I'm no longer doing that. So the question, I guess, is, will the Shadowdark RPG edition and I don't mean to sound wiggly, and it's not to be protective or Weasley, it's just to make sure that I'm saying things correctly, is the books that are out now that are put out under that license, they will always be available under that license because of the way we've done that for people to write stuff to. If Kelsey came up with Shadowdark Space version and wrote a new RPG and didn't put it out under an open license, that book would not be available under the open license. But if she did, it could be, and then that would also be similarly available basically in perpetuity because it's published with the license in it, right in it, that says, hey, if you want to take advantage of this, go ahead. So I think there's a lot more safety and security and reliability in this license and in this creator. And also, I think if going fast forward, if some big bad RPG conglomerate somehow kidnaps Kelsey and convinces her to sell, they would have a bit of a problem saying that license doesn't exist anymore either, because it's out there. The work was explicitly released under it, and it was, it's printed in it, right? It's not like what, and this is where this is a subtle difference, but it is actually, it's not that subtle. It's a pretty big difference. The player's handbook, the monster manual, the DMG, those were not released under the OGL. What was released was a system reference document. So they took sort of Wizards took like a core rule set extraction and released that under that license. In this case, Kelsey did one better, and now it's limited what you can use, but released the whole core rule book that way. So there's no there's no saying, oh, well, there's now the Shadowdark 6.2 SRD, and that's not under this license. So hopefully that sets everybody's mind at ease. I like to be able to just say yes or no, but it's impossible. They take that switch out of your brain when you go to law school. So
yes or no does not exist. There are no binary answers. But
if you ever need a lawyer, you're going to appreciate it. I'm just saying.
Well, be a lawyer. Greg's mine. You can't have. No, just kidding. Greg works at a firm that has multiple clients, but I do, but I wouldn't. Just to be very clear, from an ethical standpoint, I wouldn't accept anybody that could potentially be adverse to you. So, if anybody wants to do any publishing and enter into an agreement with Kelsey, we'd have trouble. I couldn't represent both of you. So. Oh, dang it! Oh wow. Yep. I'm chained to Shadowdark and happy for it. Well, we're very grateful. Greg, I will say, swooped in and saved the day during the OGL crisis. I had been talking to a few lawyers, and Greg and his team stood out immediately as the experts, both because Greg's a lifelong gamer and has deep knowledge of this kind of thing. And I couldn't be happier and luckier to get to work with them. And the nature of the license being like this was kind of like a vision. Like I was like, I would love for it to work this way, but it's Greg's team that made it work that way. So, having the protection here of like, yes, the license is a part of the book itself. And so as long as that book exists, the license exists. That was Greg's genius right there. And that made me very, very reassured that we wouldn't ever see like an OGL level drama with this license. And I think that, I'm just looking quickly at the chat's questions. Early on in the chat, someone asked something about this, if Shadowdark ever gets sold, would that endanger the license? I think Greg just answered that. I think it would be extremely difficult for anyone, including me, even if I was no longer someone else being the owner of this company, probably would have a very difficult time also revoking that license in any way. Okay, so
at least on the material as it's currently released. If they, and just I'll let people go read Peterson's books on the history of TSR and all that, and you see why they release new versions of the game. But
oh man, new versions of the game. Yeah. So if I ever did release like a new version of Shadowdark, we would need to make another license that would cover it because it's a new work. I have no plans to do that though right now. No
yeah,
plans.
I know that reminds me of the April Fools when Goodman Games said they're going to do DCC version 2. I was like ready to riot. And I'm like, oh wait, it's April 1st. We're fine.
Well, buy anything you guys put out. I don't care. I love Goodman Games, but I definitely felt for that. So someone is saying Curse Scroll Zines reference the OGL. Prior editions of it did. It no longer does. So no, the Curse Scroll Zines are not OGL material going forward. Someone's asking, what about translating original text to other languages? That is something that would need to be licensed, and I'm talking to individual teams about that for a language licensing deal. So yes, that would require a separate license. So geez, I think I accidentally scrolled to the bottom. I don't want to like miss any really critical questions here. Greg, sorry, bear with me. So how does licensing work for a creator from Europe? We'd want to talk specifically about that if you wanted to license this and create a language translation of it. A question, how to publish on Drive-Thru RPG? That's a big can of worms. Is it how to get started publishing or how mechanically to publish on Drive-Thru? They do have very good help articles if you are confused about the actual mechanical process. But that how to become a publisher is probably the topic of another video. So question, if you want to submit something for review to make sure you are 100% in compliance, is there a preferred method? What I would prefer for someone to do is to ask me a specific question. I don't really have time to pour through an entire work, and that raises the concern of plagiarism, crossover. Like if I know everything that you wrote before you wrote it, and then I write something similar, then that's like a weird place to be in.
And then I'm writing a non-disclosure agreement and everything gets kind of crazy. Yeah. Also, that starts to get into like sort of either legal advice or a separate license, right? I guess it's my opinion, looking at it, that compliance is not difficult. You can see what you're allowed to use and what you're not allowed to use. It's very clear in the first 2 paragraphs of the license. So, that's not to belittle the questioner. I know that, it can be, especially if there are a lot of people who have seen this and now they're inspired to write things, right? They haven't done this before and they're excited to create things, and that's great. But I guess what I would say is, just as a quick, is to create, if you create something that's your own creation, but you make it Shadowdark compatible by making reference to certain, to reference to things without actually reprinting them, with the exception of items, spells, monsters. And if you want to see how to do that well, you could look at well, I guess any of your old modules, right? Where you write something that's compatible with the system, but it's not part of the system. Or you could check out any of the like Shadow Sun or any of the creations that are coming out already. Like, look what other people have done. But yeah, it's just not practical for a publisher to look at somebody's work and sort of give them an imprimatur and say, yeah, you're compliant.
Oh, I didn't know that's what it was called.
I don't know if that's necessarily what it's called. That's a religious term. It's just what I'm using.
Oh, I see. I was like, is that a legal term? Yeah, no, and it's right. It's what Greg just said. And I understand the basis of this question because sometimes when something is simple, it seems deceptively simple. Like our license is very simple and straightforward, but when I read something like that, and especially after the OGL crisis, I'm always like, well, what's the catch? I'm always like, what's the secret deal breaker in here? And we don't have secret deal breakers in the license. Like it mentions jurisdiction in Nevada. It's because I live in Nevada. That's why. And it mentions you can copy stuff, but not like passages of text of any length, etc. That's just a way to say, like, please don't copy verbatim passages unless it's a spell, monster, or magic item. So if you have a specific question about something you're putting in a work of yours, like, can I use this monster? Can I frame something in this language? If you ask me a specific question, I will absolutely do my best to answer it. I just can't look through a whole complete work that someone has written, both because of time and lots of other issues and concerns from a legal basis. How can one request a special license? Just ask me, just email me. I'm a little behind on emails right now, guys. I'm sorry because of the Kickstarter, but I will get through everything. Especially if it's time sensitive, I try to prioritize it. In light of the revocable features, I don't quite know, is this license revocable to, no. Greg gave a really great explanation about the revocability of this license a few minutes back if someone's jumping in late. Where does something like a spell cards deck fall? If I create a deck of spell cards using spells from the core book, can I do that? Yes, yeah, that's all stuff you can copy verbatim and use.
Falls squarely in the okay category.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Source of Victory, who's a fantastic writer, is asking, if I develop video games and write choose your own adventure style books in addition to making TTRPG products, will the license permit me to use the Shadowdark RPG mechanics, monsters, and lore in these mediums? That's a really good question. I think that's something that's detailed enough that we would want to talk about it directly. And Greg might have an opinion on that too. Creating like there are some people who want to write fictional stories for Shadowdark RPG, like novelizations, and which is really, I just think it's so cool. But we've talked specifically about creating a license just to make sure we're covering all the bases there. So that's what I'd probably suggest, Ursa. Since it's a little outside the scope of what I would normally anticipate someone doing with the license. Your Deathbringer hoodie.
Oh,
yeah, It's really awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I apologize that I don't have an Arcane Library hoodie. I do have a more Danticus t-shirt, but you don't want me rocking a t-shirt on a video. It's hoodie's the way to go.
Hoodies are the ultimate comfortable thing. Someone's saying, if I share my homebrew on the Discord, should I add the license? You don't actually need to print this license in your book, unlike the OGL. You just have to print that little attribution statement. So
yes, there's just a little blurb. Well, no, I'm using the wrong word. The attribution statement. Yeah, this is not. Yeah, the OGL was a whole other thing. You had to reprint the whole thing. You don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. And the reason is, so the OGL and some licenses like it. What they do is you actually use that license language to license out your work. And maybe I should have brought this up before. This license is not that. If you were to print, and I should make this clear for people, if you were to print, like, let's say you wrote an adventure module and it was Shadowdark compatible and you abided by the terms of the third-party license, and you put the third-party attribution statement in it, and then you just wrote down copyright, cool author 2023, and you put it out. Then what you would have done is created something that nobody else has a license to use any of. And if you want to do that, that's fine. But if you also then want people to be able to sort of use your work, then you would have to license it somehow, Creative Commons or whatever. And that's between you and your counsel, how you want to do that. But this is not what some people call a viral license. This is not a share-alike license. By using by availing yourself of this license, you are creating work, you are referencing Shadowdark and certain or copying certain elements depending on the license what you use, with a license from Arcane Library to do so. But then the work that you're creating is then your own work that you own. If you want to, we're not going to obligate downstream authors to then share their work in a similar way.
Right.
Other licenses do that. This one does not. So
and I thought it was important for people who are thinking that they might want to make a career out of publishing RPG material and are looking at Shadowdark. It was very important that using this license doesn't require your work to then be freely shared to other people to use. That was a huge point of importance for me in this. And so it is not similar to open game content in that way. Cool. Same is using the same fonts as the Shadowdark material fine. Yeah, I don't know those fonts. They're listed in the book. They're all listed in the book.
You should, anybody who wants to use a font should just make sure they're following the copyright laws surrounding. There are some that are out there in the world, and actually it's the computer code that creates the, well, we don't need to get into the font and copyright law. You can Google it.
Okay. Yeah, someone's asking should we run things by you before publishing them? I don't want to get sued. First of all, I'm like, I am me, Kelsey, a person. I would have to choose to sue somebody. Just because I can punch someone in the face when I walk into a coffee shop doesn't mean I'm going to walk up to someone and punch them in the face. Like, it's like, I'm a person. If you accidentally step afoul of the license, which has happened already, then I'll just be like, hey, did you know about this? I'm sorry. Is it cool? Like, and we're gonna have a gracious conversation. It's not gonna be me being like, cease and desist. Like, this is not RoboCop.
Yeah, this isn't legal advice to Kelsey or anybody else, but just from a practical standpoint, one, we already sort of covered the license isn't that difficult to comply with. I think people might be a little skittish, and I get why, because of what's happened in the industry. But people need, and there's been some weird stuff lately. I mentioned the Pinkertons, but we won't get into it. But there's practical standpoints or practical considerations when you talk about stuff like this. If somebody put out something on DriveThruRPG and it was there for 2 days and it had 12 downloads, and then Kelsey called, or a hypothetical client called me and said, hey, somebody put out a module under their third-party license, and they've sold 12 copies and blah, blah, send them a cease and desist letter and file a lawsuit. I'd be like, whoa, cool your heels. Like, let's see what's going on. And it just doesn't make sense, because it's not a big deal right now. I'm not saying, that people should just like run afoul and only, and do bad stuff, but there's practical considerations. And if you are putting together something, I don't think you need to worry if you in good faith follow the license and all that. And if you're in doubt, I mean, you should contact an attorney and have them look at the license and look at your work and give you an opinion. But Kelsey's not really in a position to do that. And I would advise any client in that position, don't do that. Like, don't let people submit works and then you review them. And Kelsey's not trying to be, OGL 1.1 or whatever, where they were like, all right, everybody register on a website and send me all your work.
That made me so upset. I was like,
that was a great side eye, by the way.
Thanks.
That's meme worthy, but nobody do it.
Nobody clipped it. No, but I know, like the whole like register your work so we can monitor you, and like we don't have stuff like a moral clause in here. Like, I didn't like what you said, I'm yanking the license. Like, no, we really tried to make this as open and hands off.
Before anybody says anything, there is the words moral rights to appear in the license. That is not a morality clause. Those are two different things. If you want to find out what moral rights are, you can Google it. I know there's a lot of YouTube lawyers, none of whom are on the Discord, but people who may see this or whatever, who are like, oh, it says that. That's not what that is.
No, that's a different legal concept. That's not me saying, I didn't like the nature of your work, you can't publish it. Like, that's not a thing I can just do. So, all right, let me see. I think we'll see if there's any other major things that we missed. I'm going to also go through, I will look back through this and look back through the comments and write up an FAQ extrapolating off of this, to address the major questions. Someone says they want to publish an adventure and bring back one of the lost deities. Is that permissible? Yes, you can reference the beings in the book. That's explicitly allowed in the license. And let me see, Owlbear, Greg's being so patient. He's letting me go over a minute here.
I don't want anybody to be shortchanged. So you go through the comments. Let's make sure we didn't miss anything.
I hope we didn't. We're nearing the end. I'm scanning.
See, I knew we'd bore him to death. That's like,
Yes,
it
yes.
sounds exciting. Ooh, an AMA with a lawyer. And then you actually do it and you realize,
Oh, no, I know. No, I think we're good. I mean, Greg is always interesting to talk to you because he is both a legal expert and a gaming expert. Sursa saying thanks. Oh, thanks, Sursa. Thank you. I wish, Sursa, that I had answered your question more clearly, but you asked something so specific that I feel like it merits a conversation. And once I have a better answer for you, then I can share that out with the rest of the community, because as time goes on and we accumulate questions, we can expand the FAQ. And the goal with this, and I'm sure Greg agrees, is that we want people to feel comfortable using the license, empowered, not scared of it, not afraid that I'm going to attack you if you somehow in good faith misstep. And so it's about judging whether somebody's trying to do something bad, which is usually very obvious, versus it was an accident. So that's all. That's the story. Hopefully we answered a lot of your questions, and contact me if you have more of them. And Greg, thank you so much for doing this, especially on a Sunday. Greg's an important professional, and I know that he's it seems so easy to talk to because he is, but he knows a lot, and he has done so much to help this game get off the ground and be what it is. So thank you, Greg.
oh, I was when I had the opportunity to help somebody publish a role-playing game, I was like giddy. So I'm glad that it all worked out, and it's certainly been it's been a dream come true, helping you make your dream come true.
Oh, thanks. Jeez. Well, and we're helping hopefully all the people watching and all the people who are going to write for this game also pursue a dream of publishing and doing it as freely as possible. And maybe even, I would love to see somebody build a career off of publishing for Shadowdark RPG. Like, wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't that be amazing? So, all right, everybody. Well, thank you again. I guess we'll wrap our stream up for now, and we will continue to talk about licensing questions as they come up, and expanding the FAQ we'll make. So don't worry if we didn't get to you or if something comes up down the road. All right. Well, have a good afternoon and rest of your weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Everyone.
All right. I'm going to end our stream. Got to click end stream.